In Module 7, we're going to go ahead and pick up the lifespan approach. We just talked about infancy and toddlerhood, and now we're going to look at the journey of children and their level of morality. And this is where you really begin to see quite a few changes. So one of the things that children have is through their moral training, they begin to have a deeper understanding of the rules as they get older. And their level of moral reasoning is going to depend on their level of cognitive development. So the more advanced they get, the deeper the moral reasoning that they're going to display. Now, children are going to need to distinguish between two kinds of rules in daily life. One of those is moral rules. And moral rules are standards that really focus on the welfare and basic rights of individuals. So you don't want to hurt other people physically or mentally, and acts that do somehow violate those moral rules. Now, that's different than social conventional rules. What you see in social conventional rules are those standards are determined by social consensus that tells us what's appropriate in a particular social setting. Now, you're still not supposed to violate those rules, but you really don't have as many negative implications if you do. For example, don't run in the hallway when you're in school. So that is more of a social conventional rule, not really a moral rule. And you can still get a little giddy thrill if you ever in an empty elementary school and just go running down the hallway for a little bit. It's quite a bit of fun, actually, because it feels like you're breaking the rules just a little bit. But you realize that's not nearly as big of a deal as if you corner somebody after school and start beating them up, right? That is more of a moral rule. And children need to learn the differentiation between that because there's different levels of seriousness for those violations. Now, in addition, they're going to continue the work that they started to do in infancy, and that is to control their impulses. So we all have feelings and things that we would like to do, but we do give it a second thought, and most of the time we can control those impulses. And then we continue to internalize the rules of our society and be able to hopefully obey those. Okay. Now, back to theory of mind, which we discussed earlier in the chapter. Now, remember, theory of mind is the belief, that belief desire psychology, when the idea that you can have a false belief that goes ahead and reflects and influences your behavior. And so those who pass the false belief task, those toddlers, preschoolers that pass the false belief task around the age of 4, they're more able to distinguish between lying and simply having the facts wrong. You can see where this would have a lot of implications regarding morality, because if somebody was just mistaken, you wouldn't be looking at it at the same level as if it was pure lying and trying to subterfuge in some ways. Having theory of mind is going to help them understand that people's emotional reactions to other actions. So they may begin to realize that, they in the same room, the team in blue, when they score, half the room is cheering and real happy, and the other half of the room, who's been cheering for the red, is very sad. Same event, you can see by how those different actions, people can have different ways of viewing things. And those that have theory of mind also are especially attuned to other people's feelings and welfare, which, of course, as we talked about earlier with the theory of mind at the beginning of the chapter, is going to make these children probably more social, definitely more popular with their peers, because once again, they're able to understand what others are going through at a level much greater than the children that struggle with this theory of mind. So, how do we go about raising moral children? Well, there are 3 parental approaches that are associated with high levels of moral development, or parental approaches that are associated, some more effective than others, I should say. The first of which is really looking at social learning theory. And the idea here is that you punish immoral behavior and you model moral behavior. Okay, so once again, the social learning aspect, what do you do? And if you do immoral behavior, you get punished, and you look to your parents and others who model moral behavior and therefore are more likely to act that way. Now, parents can use 3 disciplinary approaches to hopefully arrive at this, and Hoffman goes on to talk about them. With love withdrawal, this is where you withhold attention, affection, or approval after a child misbehaves. The classic version of this is like the silent treatment. And if you've ever had a parent that gives you the silent treatment, you know how devastating it is, because you don't know when it's going to end and they're not communicating with you at all. Now, they do say that this has some negative effects on the child because it helps undermine the attachment, because it goes from a kind of an unconditional love of the individual, I love you no matter what, to making it a conditional type of love. I love you only if. And that can really undermine that security that those attachments might have. So they don't advise a love withdrawal approach. You also have power assertion, and you can see the power asserting here. I'm asserting my hand to your backside. And so that power assertion is, and taking away privileges and other sorts of things. What that's teaching the child is a real moral immaturity, because basically what it's stating is, when I get big, I can force others to do as I say. So it's not based on that mutual responsiveness that we were talking about in the last module, but rather that I am forcing you to do something. And so you can see then eventually that child is probably going to get bigger and stronger than the parent, and then they can exist their way, will, and that's not really a good way to develop somebody with a high moral conscience. So the real best way that we have parents is the use of induction, and that is related to higher moral development. By induction, what we do is we explain to the child why the behavior is wrong and should be changed. And we do that by emphasizing how it impacts other people. Now, that's not to say young children are going to necessarily relate to that right away. In many cases, it's going to take them a little while. So, what you typically do is still have various punishments like timeout, but you make them explain why they're going to timeout, and then you clarify if they're somehow mistaken. And it may not sink in the first few times, but as they get older, they begin to get that connection of punishment to violating of the rules and how that goes. So that's a pretty good strategy to use. Now, one of the better ways is to go ahead and use proactive parenting strategies. And by that, it means using tactics that are designed to prevent misbehavior and reduce needs for any type of discipline to start with. And that goes towards encouraging positive behaviors when they're being witnessed. And that can be hard for parents because there's a lot going on, and you kind of forget if a child's behaving well that you need to remind them or recognize that it's only when they misbehave. But if you do recognize them during the positive behaviors, you're going to be more likely to have a child who is less frequently misbehaving, and therefore you don't even have to do the discipline. They kind of take care of it themselves, which of course is a lot easier for everyone. So you want to blend frequent induction, occasionally do some power assertion, and then have lots of affection. Okay, so you want to make the child feel loved, even if you are the person there that has to do corrections from time to time. So now we're going to move on to adolescence and also talk about the social information processing model, which kind of can get at more immoral or misbehaving behavior that we see and kind of the thought process behind it. So that's will be module 8. Stay tuned.